We are now.
Excellent. Welcome to all of you who are joining us again for the continuation of our working group on cybersecurity as part of the Education, Health, and Environment Committee. We experienced some technical difficulties, so we've had about 15 minutes worth of dialogue with Secretary Leahy and our state CISO, Chip Stewart, and others from the Department of IT. And now we are moving in rapid fire on to the Maryland Emergency Management Agency Director Strickland. My colleagues from Do It, you're welcome to join and listen to the conversation. I believe Senator Kagan had a question she wanted to kick off with. Go ahead, Senator Kagan.
Thank you very much, Senator Hester. Director Strickland, thank you for your time and for your partnership in so much of my 911 work. My question was about how do we inform, and to what level do you think it's important to inform MEMA, the Maryland Emergency Management Agency, and its MJOC, Maryland Joint Operations Center, as well as our 911 centers in our affected jurisdictions? When, how, who's responsible, if you can just speak to that, and when you think it's relevant to do so, when there's a cyber attack?
I think, first off, as Chip was saying earlier, the call comes in from multiple directions when there is a problem. So what we try and do in the MJOC, as soon as we do receive it, we notify a list of folks to include Do It and the CISO. But we also go back to the local
I'm going to suggest, Director, I'm going to suggest that you try to translate or avoid acronyms. So
I know, I'm sorry.
Follow along, CISO and all that.
We try to go back to the local jurisdiction, work with the emergency manager. Depending upon the time of day, we may very well be calling into the 911 center, talking to them to get basically ground truth as to what's going on, as well as to notify them if it's something in an adjacent county. We'll also send out an alert for an area or statewide, depending upon what the outage or the disruption might be.
Yep. Director, are there examples of when you think it is imperative that the local 911 centers and MEMA should be notified, and when probably they don't need to be in the loop? Because it sounded from Do It, the Department of Information Technology, that you weren't on the A list all the time. So can you just clarify? Hello, Senator Simon Eric. So if you can just clarify the answers to that, that'd be great.
Well, one, we want to be on the A list all the time. If we're not, it's because we haven't educated people far enough to give the MJOC a call. Any type of a 911 outage and or a cellular outage is something we should know about immediately so that we can notify all the jurisdictions. Where we had the Baltimore County school system had the disruption, that wasn't something that necessarily needed to go out statewide immediately until Do It obtained certain amount of information, investigation. Then we did share that with all the local jurisdictions because there was a consideration that you may be tied into Baltimore County public schools somehow or some way.
As Director Strickland knows, but the Department of Information Technology team and my colleagues may not yet know, although Senator Riley surely knows, part of the 911 Commission recommendations that is in legislation being heard next week is outage notification. And that's really important to make sure that people hear about it at the 911 centers if there's an outage that lasts more than 30 minutes. So that's not for this, but just since we're on the topic. Thank you, Senator Hester.
Thank you, Senator Kagan. Okay, I've got a question for Director Strickland. It's got a couple parts, and then would encourage any of my other counties and my other Senate colleagues to ask questions related to the 5 bills at hand. Director Strickland, how would you describe the relationship between the local emergency manager, like in the county or the city, and the county IT person? Like, do they know each other? Is there any kind of pre-existing relationship at the local level? And then secondly, I understand that you already have a grant in place to support the kind of local cybersecurity preparedness. Could you also speak to that?
Okay. along the first question, yes, the local emergency manager, beyond any shadow of a doubt, knows who the IT director is within county government. Now, in most jurisdictions, you've got three separate entities that we're dealing with. One is the county government, one is the public schools, and the other is possibly a public safety network. So there may be three different people within the county, but in general, the emergency manager is on face-to-face communications with each of those people, or should be. School systems kind of, they're a little protective, so there's a little bit of being delicate with those folks. But yes, overall, they have a relationship. As far as it goes for assistance, we have received funding from the National Capital Region, the Urban Area Security Initiative Program, which is part of a Homeland Security grant program. And with that, we've obtained enough money that we should be able to employ 3 people who will help the local jurisdictions do assessments, develop plans, do training and exercise through that process.
So one of the questions we're trying to figure out is the degree of kind of how what you're doing fits with how DoIT sets the policy, and whether there's any potential overlap, or whether it's actually efficient use of existing resources given the networks you already have on the ground. Could you speak to that?
Well, I think it's almost, to me, kind of 2 different things.
Okay.
DoIT is very much focused on state government. I mean, that's their responsibility, is to make sure all of state government is functioning from an IT perspective as well as a security perspective. Our responsibility is to coordinate with local jurisdictions and state agencies at the time of a disaster. And we're treating cyber disruption as a disaster. So from that perspective, we want to be with the local jurisdictions before, during, and after. And in this particular case, building protection, prevention, and mitigation, building that resilience that's needed. So hopefully they don't have a disruption and a long-term event.
Thank you very much, Director Strickland. Senator Simon-Ayer, Senator Riley, do you have any questions for MEMA or Senator Simon-Ayer, since you just joined? Any questions for DoIT, who is still here?
I apologize. I just got off another meeting that concluded at 4. So,
and we were expecting that. Thank you so much for joining us.
yeah, no problem. It's nice to see Russ again. So, no, I don't have any questions at the moment.
Senator Riley? Okay, let me press on then, because I've probably got more questions than we have time. So once again, I'm going to ask Director Strickland the same kind of the question I asked our state CISO. If a call comes in, either through emergency manager or through 911 about a cyber attack, what happens next?
Call will be received here. They'll immediately contact our duty officer and give them the information. Duty officer will verify it back to where allegedly the disruption may be, and then immediately will reach out to DoIT, who is the lead state agency, to basically give advice, guidance, direction, as well as anybody else we may need, depending upon what it is it may involve. So if it's something, let's say, that's health department related, but it's cyber, so we're going to bring in the health department. We may bring in the Department of Human Services, and we're also tied into the health department activities, as well as DoIT. And then from that perspective, coordinate what it is at the state level we can do to help at that local level.
That's helpful. So, and is that the similar process for other disasters?
Yes, exact same process.
Okay, and then I guess the remaining question I have is, and it's just probably both for you, Director Strickland, and also Secretary Leahy, with the Baltimore County School incident. And let's think about not what happened, but what ideally would happen. How do we get like the right process in place so that the right people are notified and DoIT's coming in sooner rather than later? what would you suggest, Director Strickland? And then I'd love to hear from you, either Secretary Leahy or Mr. Stewart.
Well, actually, that's not a bad example. In the same way, we had a similar event with a hospital in Baltimore County. As soon as we got the information, we immediately set up a conference call with the players at both the state level, and then we set up a call following that with the players at the local level. In this particular case, we reached out to the emergency manager who pulled the county IT person in. Quite frankly, we had a little trouble with the school system voluntarily coming in and speaking with us and helping us. But after a while, they did come in and talk, and we opened up that line of communications and basically asking them, what is it the state can do? And we kind of went from there based upon what their requests were. Same thing with the hospital, only the hospital was extremely protective of anyone coming in to help them, quote unquote, with their system.
Would our state CISO like to respond? Your ideal scenario?
I think zooming out and looking at that incident, the thing that would have been most impactful in making things move more quickly is before the bad thing happens, having clearly identified reporting lines and authorities leading up to response. Because I think what we found was that the county school system didn't, right or wrong, know that they should go through the county government for emergency management. So they wanted to come directly to do it and MEMA. And a lot of time was lost in the confusion of that. And fortunately, because everyone was so collaborative, a lot of time was measured in minutes and hours, not days and weeks. But I think that's a big thing that we could improve is, and I think it's a legislative or administrative issue, is ensuring that those reporting lines and authorities are clearly defined, and it's not at any individual's discretion.
Let me chime in a second. Chip's got an excellent point there. And now there's two state agencies on the call right now, but how many of us are aware that when you all very well revised our annotated code last year, anytime more than anytime two state agencies or more are involved on the same incident, they're supposed to report it to MEMA. Now there's legislation and it doesn't work. Now we've run into COVID. We haven't had the time to truly educate it, but we don't need to know every time a state highway truck is sitting there with a state trooper on the highway. Well, that's how far that, the letter of the law could go versus the spirit of the law. But that's at the state level. Now, how we legislate and require the local jurisdiction to report, I'm interested in having that conversation, but that's easier said than done.
Agreed. Sorry, one more question I forgot to ask earlier of both of the agencies. In terms of, an ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure, currently, are either one of your organizations actively, reaching out to local county governments, local health departments, local schools about what they need to do in terms of implementing, best practice for cybersecurity?
So one of the things that the Security Operations Center engages in is the proactive monitoring of those units connected to the Network Maryland network. So anyone that's connected through the Network Maryland network receives notifications about vulnerable systems, ports and protocols that are open that probably shouldn't be, or that the unit might have accidentally opened, and things like that. And in terms of prevention, those units handling those issues is worth more than a pound of prevention. Director Strickland?
Yeah, 100% correct. And that's why we're trying to hire 3 people to go out there and start working on this.
Awesome. Okay. I'm sure we could talk for much longer, but in the interest of time, I'm told that we do have our next stakeholder on the phone. Once again, you guys are welcome to stay, but I'd like to invite a representative from MACO to address us. Is that you, Ms. Javin?
Yes, it is. Hi,
Good
everyone.
Good to see
Nice
you
to see
again.
you.
I feel like we just talked last evening.
Yes, good to see you and good to see everyone. Thanks for reaching out to MACO and having us be a part of this. I apologize for just joining. It's been one of those days. So I definitely appreciate the opportunity to kind of provide some insight from the county perspective. I'll keep it very brief on my end. I have two wonderful IT experts with us. Mark Ripper is the Chief Information Officer in Carroll County and MACO's IT affiliate president. And we also have Keith Young, the Chief Information Security Officer in Montgomery County with us. So local jurisdictions obviously are very inclined to work with MEMA, DO-IT, the state in general. We look forward to collaborating with the departments to participate in best practices, information sharing. But I think it's a unanimous county perspective that our technology operations should not be under the direct oversight of state agencies. So counties should own their own cybersecurity plans. Each county is very unique. Each varies in available technical resources, budgets, complexity, size. So having ownership of these plans definitely allows for each entity to address their individual strengths and weaknesses, as well as the unique environment within which they operate. So that's about all I have, and I'd love to turn it over to either Mark or Keith.
We do have some specific questions, Drew.
And so if they have opening comments and you all are open to that, that's totally fine. If you all would like to ask questions, they are the ones who will be able to provide the technical answers.
Okay, why don't we do like a 30-second opening statement from each of you, because we've got 10 minutes for MACO in total.
Perfect.
Sure. My name is Mark Ripper from Carroll County Government. Thank you all for having me here today. We really appreciate it. We do want to cooperate with the state agencies if something would happen. I would love to have an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. I was listening to your conversations earlier that says, okay, you have an incident. Here's are the steps that you need to go through to do that. I don't have that right now. I would love, and would love to help coordinate something like that if need be, so that the county governments do have that as we move forward. We do want to maintain our independence, but at the same time, we're all running off of the same network. So we do want to work in conjunction with each of you. And again, I thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Mr. Ripper. Mr. Young.
Good afternoon. Keith Young, the CISO for Montgomery County Government. And to echo what Ms. Jabin said before, is that for us, we have a fairly complex environment, and to add yet another oversight. So we have credit card data, which falls under PCI, which has 200 technical requirements. We have criminal justice data, which has another 200 technical requirements. We have HIPAA, which has another couple dozen. We have a couple other dozen laws about reporting and security and privacy of data. So adding yet another law and adding yet another oversight is literally just going to go onto the stack, versus what I think all of the jurisdictions need is resources and help, because obviously cyber is not going to get any smaller and the challenges are just going to continue to grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. I see Senator Kagan has her hand up.
Thank you, Senator Hester. Ms. Jabin, it's nice to see you. And thank you, Mr. Ripper, Mr. Young, for being here. So, Ms. Jabin, I totally get the concept of leave us the hell alone. We know what we're doing. One size doesn't fit all. And I understand that as a principle.
Mm-hmm.
My concern in this situation is that County X is super focused on this, invests a lot of time and staff resources and all that. And so, you know, counties Y and Z don't think it's important or don't have the resources. And then they are the most vulnerable. Can you talk about, is there a middle ground in some of this? Because I'm not sure I can totally buy into the go away.
Yeah. So I definitely don't want my comments to be taken as that. So I apologize if that's what it came off as. I think that, as Keith and Mark said, we definitely want to collaborate. I think it's mostly, as I know you all have heard in EHE, that we resist state mandated policies. So I think collaboration is wonderful. I think having the state as someone who does the best practices and is the center of what do you do in this circumstance? What do you do if this new technology comes out? That kind of thing, I think, is what I've heard that we would like, is kind of a collaborative thing. So it's not, I wouldn't say it is a leave us alone. And I am not the IT expert, which is why I agree.
Understood.
Welcome.
Understood.
Yeah.
So,
So if Mark and them have comments.
So I'm just going to say that a synonym, an imprecise synonym, because you guys know I'm a word nerd, an imprecise synonym for collaboration is negotiation.
Mhm.
Imprecise. But state says you ought to do this, and county says, yeah, we don't feel like doing that, or we can't afford to do that, or we don't have the personnel or the expertise to do that.
Mhm.
Sorry. And Ms. Jabin, you know that I'm all about local governments.
I know.
So I don't like unfunded mandates. I don't like unreasonable dictates as a concept.
Mhm.
We're talking about public safety, public health, access to local government that people pay dearly for. I'm thinking that a little bit of an unfunded mandate or a little bit of a strict oversight is appropriate when it comes to this, because Baltimore County had to shut down its whole school thing, and
Yep.
been 911 centers that have been shut down, and there have been ransomware problems. And so I will be really eager to hear from you, from Mako, from Mr. Ripper, Mr. Young, probably not in this conversation, but offline or something, as to where there's reasonable level of engagement and oversight and where you think there's a line, because I'm thinking that line is pretty far along in the mandate process, in my view, as one person.
No, and I definitely appreciate those comments. I am happy to follow up. Again, I will leave it up to the IT professionals if they have further comments at this time. I definitely think maybe partnership is a better word than collaborate. Because I think we all are on the same page of wanting all our residents, everyone to be safe and protected.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Senator Hester, maybe you can help us figure out what next steps are going to be best on this. And I see Secretary Leahy here too.
Yes. Secretary Leahy, do you have a quick question?
Well, just a quick statement. As Mr. Young said, we're all using Network Maryland as our network. And so, for things that we're all using a common platform and common tools, we should have standard operations that are a partnership already. And so the real issue becomes, how do we find ways to work together? So again, we are creating minimal standards that everyone realizes are necessary to protect the data and the network itself.
Thank you.
I'm
Agreed.
going to suggest, Mr. Secretary, that minimal standards aren't probably what we want either. So again, that could be a word choice, but I want them to be pretty high end and sufficient and strong. So thank you, Madam Chair.
My next question is for the IT people, Mr. Ripper and Mr. Young. What resources are you currently receiving from the state in terms of, cyber IT support? And what, in your ideal world, what would you like to? We've already got the one pager on who to call in case of in case of emergency. But what can you just each speak just briefly about the resources and support you would like to see from the state, and how best it might be to get those resources from the state?
So I'll take the question first. As Mr. Stewart mentioned in the past, is we do get information from his security operations team as far as any data that might have been found on the internet that might be sensitive, or any specific servers that are exposed. So that's what we get today. But ideally, and this goes back to Senator Kagan's comment as far as where that gray line is, ideally what I would say is the best thing that I think the state could do is to provide resources in terms of funding to the jurisdictions. So instead of mandating that that security awareness training has to be made available to all employees and saying it has to be from these vendors, instead of having that stick approach, have the carrot approach of saying we will provide funding for your security awareness training or match funding if you spend it in order for you to do it. Because all the jurisdictions know, as an example, that they need security awareness training. They just might not have, and especially the smaller ones, don't have the staff and technical expertise to deploy it. So having those types of resources available from the state across the different counties, I think would be the most successful.
Right. So I just want to differentiate. You mentioned that you would like funding to do that. But I think the end goal is actually that those resources are available, whether it's provided as a resource or provided through funding.
I think going back to what Ms. Jabin said before is each of the counties are different. So if there were to be a statewide security awareness program, I think it would be, and again, I'm sticking with one of the specific laws to prove the example, but if there would be just a service available from the state to provide security awareness training for everyone, I don't think that would be effective as funding to each of the jurisdictions to do it themselves.
Okay, I understand your point. Let's move on to Mr. Ripper, please.
Okay, thank you. Again, I think it's really important, and I like the example that Mr. Young used with the training. I think it would be really nice for the state to come together, work with the counties in a partnership. I love that word. And okay, here are the things each of the counties needs to be able to do in order to provide appropriate cybersecurity there. Some counties may have the ability to fund most of that list and be able to do all of those things. There may be other smaller counties that don't have, it's not cheaper if you're smaller for the equipment and the software and all that's there to be able to do that, to be able to assist with that. I also think it's really important on the back end. God forbid something happens, and we talked about that a little bit earlier, that the state is there with the resources to go in. And we've even had conversations at the affiliate level, instead of each county having to purchase a cybersecurity policy, which most counties probably can't afford something at the level they really need to have it at if something were to happen, is to have a state, with the county's participation, of course, have a cybersecurity insurance policy, so that if something does happen to one of the jurisdictions, then we've got a much larger pot that we could pull from to be able to handle that and cover those costs. And I would be looking for the state to come in and help me solve the problem if something were like that to happen. So I really want them to participate with me. I'll use all the expertise I can get to help determine what the issue was in moving forward. I heard you saying some people don't want to participate. You'd have our full and complete cooperation if that were to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ripper. I just want to give any of my other senator colleagues a chance to ask any questions before we perhaps move on to the next segment of this thriller. Senator Simon Ayer, Senator Riley, Senator Kagan. Okay, I do have one last question for Mako before I completely let you go. And for Mr. Young, Mr. Ripper, in the answers that were provided, in writing prior to this, it was mentioned that several local governments are in the process of developing cybersecurity plans or have these already based on NIST or DHS standards. And I'm just curious, is there any kind of roll up of what our counties are doing? Local county governments, local health departments, local school systems, about where they are in this process that could be provided to us? Is anybody got that macro view?
I can have it for you and we'll follow up with that. That's helpful.
That would be awesome. I would like to know who's got what and how far they are.
I can definitely come up with a survey, get it out to all our county IT people, and we can work together on getting you all the information.
Thank you. I see Director Strickland nodding as well. Thank you. Okay, let us move on. Our next segment of this whirlwind tour of cybersecurity across the state is with the Office of Legislative Audits. Do we have Greg Hook on the line? I see Stephen Jersey. Hello, how are you? Are you the OLA representative for us?
Hello, Senator. Greg is.
Oh, there's Greg.
Greg is joining us.
Well, of course, this is going to be thrilling. Why would I not take part in? Actually, auditors don't like thrilling. They like plain and simple and calm. Thank you for having us. With me, as you said, Stephen Jersey, who is the OLA's ISA Audit Director, and that stands for Information Systems Audit. I also have Mike Merdzak on the line, who's one of our audit managers, and also Mark Hagenbach, who's also an audit manager who have worked on several audits. I don't know how much material, I gave Alexis a lot of material last week in preparation for this meeting, so I don't know how much he shared with you. But if you may, let me just give you a rundown of how we audit IT for state agencies. And I would characterize our audits as decentralized. So we don't do one big IT audit for the state. We audit IT at individual state agency fiscal compliance audits, and also the school system audits as well. And we don't audit IT at every state agency. We don't have the resources for that. We have an office that has, our ISA audit division has less than 20 people in it. So we have to pick and choose, but we tend to pick based on significance and risk, the bigger agencies and the more risky and important data systems and databases. When we do an audit of an IT function, we can do either use two different audit programs or do one or the other. We generally do both, and one is called a general controls review, and the other is a network security review. And I believe one of the documents that was shared, I hope you have a copy of it. It's actually a one-page Excel spreadsheet, and it has, it's called categories of OLA type of audits, and it has 18 different finding types on it. And I don't know if you have that, and if I can share, do I have the ability to share a screen? We use Teams, so I'm not real familiar with Zoom. Can I actually control this?
I'm not sure. Lemoria, can we give Greg sharing capacity?
Yes, if he would have to, no, you know what, I'm sorry, no. Wait.
Memoria, I have it and I can share it with you.
It's not hard.
Gotten it.
Because what I can do is I can make you the co-host, Alexis, if you'd like, and then you can share it.
Okay, that works too.
Okay, I'll do that.
While we're chatting, could I ask that MJM rename yourself in the upper right corner so we have your full name? Appreciate that.
That's you, Mike.
Upper right corner of your own box. You just click rename and just type your official name.
Okay, Alexis, you should have the capability. Let me know if not, I'll make you the host if not.
Okay, sounds good. Let me try it now.
Alexis, it's called Categories of Common OLA. That's, actually I was looking at my computer. I said, that's it. I was looking at my computer. Well, in any case, we do a general controls review. Oh, yeah.
Is that it?
No, that's not it. That's another one.
Oh, this is the OLA reports. Okay, let me try the second one.
Yeah.
While she's pulling this up, Greg, one of my questions was going to be the Baltimore City Education Department as their most recent example. My understanding was that they had two audit findings, two reports, spaced years apart. One released the day before their last, they were attacked. Were those state audits? Like, how does it work at the county level? Like, do we have a good picture of what's going on with cybersecurity across our education system?
Oh, yeah, we do general control reviews and network security reviews at all 24 local school systems during all 24 local school system audits. So the audit report that was issued the day before, that was our audit, and that was our third audit of Baltimore County Public Schools. We audit the schools on a 6-year cycle, and so that was the third audit report. But Steve can answer in more detail, but I believe we have pretty much a similar audit approach for each of the 24 local school systems, and we have similar findings. And Steve, do you want to elaborate a little bit on Baltimore County in particular? But I think our audit coverage is pretty thorough, albeit they're 6 years apart.
Yes, Greg. And a key point there, Senator, to your question, those audits are focused exclusively on the educational slice of the county government, if you will, the local education agency. So we're not doing any work at all in respect to county, the broader county government operation. It's only education, the school systems. And like Greg said, it's consistent across all the LEAs.
So you do, just to be clear, you do each LEA once every 6 years?
That is correct. And
so that means that Baltimore County Schools had a repeat finding from 6 years ago.
That is correct.
Okay, and so what's the process for making sure that the LEAs follow up on, in particular, a cybersecurity finding in their once every 6 year audit?
Well, Greg can speak to this. We have a closeout process with each individual audit. We get responses from the auditees, the school systems. We seek agreement. We seek assurance that they're going to fulfill recommendations with state government agencies. If there are a certain number of repeats, we have a more a follow-on process with some of those agencies, particularly if they've had a unsatisfactory rating on controls. Now, Greg, I don't know that we have that follow-up process with the LEAs, do we?
No, we don't. I guess I should probably clarify one thing, that there is the public audit report, and then there's something called discussion notes. And the discussion notes are preliminary audit findings that are completely confidential. We don't share those with anybody other than the auditee. And we share those before the actual public report is prepared and finalized. And the information on these discussion notes is much more thorough and comprehensive than the public report. So for example, in the ISA findings of Baltimore County, Steve and his audit managers would have shared some very specific audit findings with Baltimore County Public Schools about maybe even the actual server names that were potentially at risk. And they would have talked about ways to mitigate this risk and control it. So as Steve said, during the exit conference, we'll hopefully get agreement. And then we then use the audit report process where it's much more general, because we don't want to give anything away in the report to allow bad parties to take advantage of the entity. And then we finally get their agreement. And once we reach agreement with them and they agree to do it, and usually they agree to fix it, it won't take 6 years to fix. Usually they'll agree to fix it within a year. I guess that's safe to say. But we do not do any other follow-up after we get their agreement. So in Baltimore County's case, I'm pretty sure they agreed 6 years ago to fix this problem. And over that 6 year period, apparently it was not fixed. Steve, you can speak to that better than I can about that particular finding, but
yeah, that was the case.
Yes.
Okay. And just to complete the circle, if you will, if this was a state agency, what would happen?
Well, they would be audited every 3 to 4 years instead of every 6. And as Steve said, there may be certain follow-up done based on number of repeat findings in the audit report or the number of findings in the audit report. But generally, most state agencies also do not get a formal follow-up process from us. And frankly, I don't want to poor mouth my office, but I don't have the resources to go and do periodic follow-ups at various state agencies of the school systems. I mean, right now we're stressed to the max with special COVID work, with the Baltimore City Police Department. I mean, and just our regular audits. And I just don't have the resources for that. So we've always relied on the agency's representation that they agree with the findings and that they commit to fixing them.
Right. And your office does really, really good work. We certainly don't want to stress you. I do think we need more eyes to make sure this stuff gets done, because it's costing on the back end. You don't fix the problem originally, it costs much more to fix in the long run.
I would agree. Now, there is, I believe, a new position in state government. It's Education Inspector General, who I believe, I don't know how much authority and power this person or this office has, but I do believe they can review local school systems and conduct work at local school systems. And perhaps they could do a follow-up of key findings. And the Department of Budget and Management has an audit follow-up unit. And they actually will, for our state audits, they actually will come into our, well, back when we actually had people coming to the office, they would actually come into the office for certain key audit reports we issued of state agencies, and they would review our work papers, and then they would then visit the state agency after a certain period of time and see if they were actually complying or not. So they would actually go to the follow-up in the field, I believe in the field, with the state agencies. Now, it wouldn't be every one of them, but it would be certain critical ones that had a very significant audit report. But that was the Department of Budget and Management as a group. And the group is actually led by a person who used to work for us, was one of our, an ex-OLA auditor, Joan Peacock.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. Senator Kagan, do you have a question?
Thank you, Senator Hester. First off, Mr. Hook, as always, I'm just so grateful for the vitally important work that you are doing. Mr. Jersey, Mr. Mertzak, thank you for your name. And Mr. Hagenbuck, thank you for being with us. In the chart that you posted, Greg, you it looked like every single line was related to PII. Are there not cyber oversight issues in your audits that come up that are unrelated to personally identified information?
Oh my gosh, yes. And that's the document I was trying to bring up. We have another document and it has 18 finding categories in it. The one document you mentioned actually is a PII document because we wanted to update the PII findings since December 2019's presentation of the Joint Audit and Evaluation Committee that we did on PII. We wanted to update since then how many more PII findings we've had. But there's another document I was trying to show, and it lists 18 different categories of findings.
And Ms. Foxworth, do you not have that document, or do we? Okay, let's see.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. This is thrilling. That's it. This document. Okay, so the first 11 are common. Well, not common, but these are the findings we would have generally from our general controls review. And you can see it includes a disaster recovery plan. It would have program change controls, password controls, file backup procedures. That's where PII would show up. As you can see, number 9 is PII.
Yeah.
So we could have
identifying information.
Sure. So generally we could have up to 11 different findings from our general controls review. And then if you would scroll down a tiny bit more, it'll have number 12 through 18. And these are the kind of findings we would have from our network review. And this, for example, in Baltimore County Public Schools, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, this is where they had the problem with firewall protection. That was one of the issues. It was
as well as number 15, the public server placement.
So you might want to do the typo fix on number 13 in 2 places. But just a question about 17.
Senator, I know you're a word person.
I'm a word person.
Steve typed it and I forgot to check it. It's my problem. I'm going to blame Steve, but it's also my fault for not checking it. Sorry.
Both words are misspelled, but that's okay. So my question is student access, number 17. Is that what we do want student access? Is that literally
inappropriate student access?
Inappropriate student access.
And sometimes what we have is for example, high school students who potentially could, if they go and take their computer to school and hardwire, they potentially could get into a system or
change their grades.
Yeah, well, I don't know if they could do that, but they would probably try. It would be a lot like the movie, what was it, War Game, with that Matthew Broderick film when he launched nuclear missiles. Hopefully it won't be that bad, but yeah.
Okay, but I also parent access. I mean, I assume it's any access by anyone who's not supposed to be in it.
Well, we've had a finding, believe it or not, it was Caroline County Schools several years ago. We had a finding where they had their Wi-Fi was not secured. And we at the exit conference mentioned that to them. And then somebody from the Caroline Schools observed, well, that explains why somebody pulls behind the building after hours in a pickup truck and sits there, because they were getting free Wi-Fi from behind the building. So that could be an issue.
Okay, and number 8, if you could just translate the acronym SOC.
Service organization controls. That is when you have a third party running some of your data operations or maintaining your data, that's a service organization doing that. And the AICPA has established certain controls. It's called SOC. They pronounce the acronym. It's a SOC. And what that means is we want the state agencies to get what's called a SOC 2 Type 2 review done every year. And a SOC 2 Type 2 means that a private contractor comes into the data provider and actually looks at certain controls in place and make sure the controls are appropriate. And we want the state agencies to get that report, review that report, and if there are deficiencies noted, we want them to make sure, monitor the contractor to make sure the deficiencies are corrected, because that deals with the security over state databases.
Absolutely.
Again, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong.
Senator Hester. Oh.
Spot on, Greg.
All right. Thank you. I just want to check to see if anybody else has questions. Otherwise, I have a few more. And could you stop sharing your screen, Alexis? There, I can see everybody. Awesome. We've got the best council and staff support. We certainly do. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions. I'll move on with a couple of mine. You may be either thrilled or scared that I've actually read the report that you guys have done on PII findings at least 5 times. And I know a number of our agencies have had repeat findings, which means that they've had several findings, on the 4-year cycle. And so one of the recommendations I pulled out from your recommendations, Mr. Hook, was that DO-IT, the USM Office of Administration, and the Judicial Administration Office, I know there's a better title for that, but advise and reinforce with their agencies and monitor their progress in addressing PII incidents. And my question is whether, to your knowledge or the knowledge of anybody on this call, whether that is actually happening, because we still have all these repeat PII findings.
I don't know if the judiciary report actually is currently in review in our office. And the reason we mentioned judiciary, they're of course independent, so I don't believe DO-IT has the authority to mandate controls or corrective action. And but I don't know if there is a repeat finding in there or not, but that report should be coming out within the month for judiciary.
Right. And just to clarify my question, because I understand we've got these different separation of powers between the different types of government, but I thought your recommendation was that the Judicial Administration, for their own hierarchy, monitor and advise and reinforce, with everybody in that judicial system, that these PII findings were important and being taken care of. Likewise with USM within the University of Maryland system, and then likewise with DO-IT and all the agencies. And so I'm just trying to figure out, if somebody is actively monitoring all these PII findings within the separate branches of government and ideally reporting back up, so your poor office doesn't have to keep doing all this work and then have your findings not implemented.
Yeah, you're speaking of the presentation we made to the Joint Audit and Evaluation Committee.
Yes,
yeah, those recommendations were not actually in the audit reports. That was the recommendation we made to the Joint Audit and Evaluation Committee of what should be done. So I do not know if judiciary is actually monitoring for that, or if University System of Maryland. DO-IT could speak to the issue of whether DO-IT's auditing is monitoring the state agencies for PII. But I think it was telling that the document we sent that was up on the screen earlier, that since December 2019, we had 13 new PII findings and none of those were repeats. So I think that was, according to the doc, I'm looking at it right now, but I don't believe any of those were repeats. And I know there was JCR language, which I think you were involved, Senator Fry-Hester, in establishing, which required DO-IT's security officer to report to us on DBM, Department of Education, and State Treasurer, which had repeat audit findings for PII. And we're reviewing that document now as we speak.
Yes, that little technical piece of budget language was my doing with your help. Thank you so much. Okay, well, maybe we can just, Secretary Leahy, just in the interest of time, if you guys are actually monitoring this, can you answer in 30 seconds or less? Because I have one final question for the auditors. Can you unmute, Secretary Leahy?
Yes, please.
So
what's the question?
The question was, in their report, their recommendations to the Joint Audit Committee last year, the auditors suggested that DO-IT advise, reinforce, and monitor the progress of all the state agencies with respect to their PII findings. Is that currently something that you guys are doing?
I believe that that is part of the assessments we have just undertaken, because we're going to assess security and data, and specifically PII falls under the data side. But we also want to take that a step further to look at data governance, because obviously many of the problems that occur with people releasing PIIs, they aren't thinking about how to maintain and protect particular types of data. They just use it as unstructured data. So I think the simple answer is yes. I don't have any results to report to you today.
Okay, thank you very much. And my last question for the auditors, once again, seeing, does anybody else have questions? Okay, it's just me. I'm aware that you've recently audited Do It itself. And I'm trying to find a good way to answer this question. But there were a number of findings in that report, and I believe that we have the agency's response to those findings. But is there any way to tell just how good a job we are doing as a state in general, in managing this? Like, are the number of audit findings that we found with Do It, are those comparable to what you would see in any other state
agency? Well, there were two. We audit Do It. We do two audits of Do It. One is just Do It. It's a fiscal compliance audit. We look at their primary operations, so it's not necessarily focused on IT controls. The second one is Do It as I'm trying to read my own service as a service provider. There are, I recall, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, there were some similar findings between that audit and our other audits of state agencies when it comes to IT. But I want to give Do It credit, if you don't mind, just for a second.
Please.
The criteria we use on our audits for IT security, a lot of it is based on Do It established best practices and IT controls. So there is a Do It security manual, and Steve knows the proper name for it, but a lot of the criteria we use is established by Do It. So that's just a throw out to Do It, a very positive statement that they have proper controls. And I think part of the problem is the state agencies either don't have the resources or don't have the wherewithal sometimes to implement the controls that Do It is recommending in their security manual.
Right. And
I'm not sure if I answered your question or evaded it.
No, that was very helpful. And I'm trying to think of a better way to ask my question. Are there metrics that we as a state could be tracking that would help us to know whether we're doing a good job on IT governance and cybersecurity?
Honestly, from my perspective, it might just be the audit findings, the number of audit findings. I don't know. Steve, do you have an idea how we could do that?
Senator, on that, we don't develop metrics in terms of cybersecurity or the resilience. Unfortunately, like Greg mentioned, we're in the realm of the audits and the results from the audits. We're not out looking for benchmarks and metrics in the audits. We're zeroing in on common areas of control issues and taking a snapshot at a point in time, trying to see if the agencies are well secured in certain precise forms and fashions, but we're not looking at broad metrics.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you so much for all the hard work that you guys do. It's been really helpful. And members, there's a lot of information that was sent to us, over the weekend. So if you feel like reading that PII report 5 times, it's thrilling.
Thrilling. I like that word. I'm going to use that in the speech tomorrow at the office. Thrilling.
Okay, excellent. Let's move on to our last stakeholder of the day. We've invited folks from the University of Maryland system to join us. And I'm not sure who they are.
So they haven't logged on just yet. They didn't get the updated link. So they should
not.
They just got it. So they should be checking in soon. Looks like they just entered the waiting room. It's Mr. Eismeyer.
Wonderful. Mr. Eismeyer, you're right on time. Can you hear me? This is Senator Katie Hester. There you are.
I can, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and getting the new link. We had technical difficulties, of course.
No problem. We've certainly suffered from that plenty in the system. So,
well, we really appreciate you making yourself available. You're on with several of my good colleagues, Senator Kagan, Senator Simoneer, Senator Riley, myself from the Education, Health, and Environment Committee. We've got folks from Do It, including Secretary Leahy and Director of MEMA, Russ Strickland, and staff. So I guess to cut to the chase, USM has been carved out of, several pieces of legislation that are before us today. And we just wanted to give you a chance to explain your request to be carved out and to explain why that makes sense to us. And why, given that you're also using the Network Maryland system, why you wouldn't be subject to the same minimum standards as everybody else. I know that's not a softball question, but we've got like 10 minutes. So I wanted to get straight to the chase.
sure, thank you very much. And I would also like to take a minute to introduce Mark Kather, who's also here. He's one of our Chief Information Security Officers in the system.
Hi, I'm Mark Kather. I'm with UMBC. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer, also Chief Privacy Officer and Assistant General Counsel.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. So we hopefully everyone received the written answers to the questions that we received over the weekend. Actually, they were sent last week, but I got them over the weekend, and we submitted those answers in writing. Which sort of, I think, get to the questions that you're asking. Given our statutory requirement, the system's statutory requirement to be functionally compatible with the state of Maryland cybersecurity standards and policies, and our historic building of our programs at each institution, and building our system standards, cybersecurity standards, with that requirement, but also with the additional requirements that we have as institutions of higher education, which include other significant compliance standards, FERPA, and each institution has HIPAA compliance needs. Export control related to research data, and so on and so forth. We've sort of built our standard and expanded on it a bit to to account for the unique needs of our institutions, which frankly are like small cities and on 24/7, caring to the needs of students and so on and so forth. So we're a bit different, and our cybersecurity standards reflect that, in that we are not a 9-to-5 quote unquote entity, and that's again how our standards have been written and evolved to to account for that fact. Indeed, we do have some connections to Network Maryland. We also have our own Maryland Research and Education Network, which is our primary wide area network that services all of our USM institutions, as well as public and private institutions of higher ed and community colleges, and some K through 12s as well. So, I think that's a long, windy answer to your question, but we have built and matured our cybersecurity program and standards in the same way that Do It has done so over the years as well. And we feel like for, one of the biggest reasons, as was stated in the written testimony, is the potential for a significant, financial hit to be compliant with both standards, to be compliant with Do It standards as well as our cybersecurity standards. Likewise, I think one of the fundamental issues is the system, the university systems oversight and adherence to the Board of Regents in terms of their fiduciary and operational responsibility and oversight of the system and its institutions. and a graying of the lines between the board's oversight and their fiduciary responsibility for us, and having do it have a similar operational oversight in terms of cybersecurity or any of the IT related issues, just creates a bit of a challenging dynamic. So Mark, any additional color to add to that?
Oh, sure. I mean, so a couple of things just to keep in mind is, I mean, we've had actually a very similar structure within the University System of Maryland as what the bills that are in front of the legislature now actually try to create for the executive branch. We've had it for almost 20 years now. So the same kind of a council as the bills are forming within the legislature now, some of those bills that are being debated, we've had that council for 20 years of all the institutions, all the chief information security officers meet monthly. We have had our USM security policy, as Michael mentioned, but it goes all the way back to almost the beginning of that council, and we've continued to evolve it and make sure that we keep up with all the technological advancement and things like that, plus all the different information types that we hold, because we hold information from healthcare information to student information to all kinds of research information, all kinds of other things. And many of those are things that, quite honestly, state agencies don't necessarily deal with in the same kind of a way that we do. So that's why we are kind of unique in this. We have our policy, we have our board. We've been making sure in our own structure that we keep all those things secure and safe for almost 20 years now. And we have in statute, in Maryland code, the requirement to be functionally compatible with the state's policies. So whatever they put forth, even now and into the future, we have to make sure that we maintain functional compatibility with that. But again, keeping in mind and being respectful of all the things that we do that are a little bit different than what they do. So that's how we kind of marry the two worlds together and make it work.
Thank you. Just one clarifying point. I understand. I do want to applaud you. I know that, in addition to your own cybersecurity practices, I've worked with many different, parts of the system that are really on the forefront of leading cybersecurity, research and training and all of that. Can you just help me to understand, is there anything in your excellent cybersecurity, standards, or the things that you have to apply with FERPA or HIPAA that actually conflict with what DO IT is recommending?
It's not so much that what we do conflicts, what they do conflicts with what we do, because we all have the same law. I mean, we all are falling under the same laws in that way. It's really just a matter of how they implement it versus how we implement it. They can look at things. I mean, the example that I've used in the past, and I don't have direct inside information, but if you go to the Motor Vehicle Administration, all the computers on the counters are pretty much in the same way. All the software running on all those computers can kind of be controlled in one way. That kind of a business model, like you're a bank or like you're, a set business, is very different than how a university works, where one professor is working in one thing and another professor is working on something different, and students need something else. And when it comes down to it, we all have the same laws that we have to apply to, be it HIPAA, FERPA, or anything else. But we have the flexibility to make sure that every individual program can work with its needs versus a one size kind of fits all 9-to-5 business model, which is how most of the state agencies work.
And by the same token,
I think you would get a lot of pushback on 9 to 5. And
Sure.
For my stance, I certainly was here till 10:30 several nights.
No, not saying that's about you at all. I'm talking about like a counter.
I know. I just had to cut you off right there.
Sure.
We're already at the top of the hour, but I started a bit late. Let me look at my other colleagues and see if they have any questions, or if either the director of MEMA or Secretary Leahy or our state CISO have any questions.
Could I add just one fine point real quickly, and that is
If it's 30 seconds or less.
That we are, thank you, that we are audited. Each institution is audited individually by DLS's Office of Legislative Audits, as well as USM internal audits, who follows up on every DLS audit, as well as a third-party auditor. And part of that, again, is to ensure that our standard is maintaining functional compatibility with the state of Maryland. Thank you.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because I actually requested all the PII findings from all of the university system from the past year, and there's quite a few, and some of them are repeat findings. And I don't want to go through them, but I'm just scrolling through a spreadsheet. One in 2019, one in 2017. cybersecurity malware 2016, 2018, 2019, 2018, 2019, 2016, 2017. Now, can you, I'm still scrolling. I mean, there's 57 lines here of PII findings. Have you guys followed up per my previous request? Our auditors recommended that USM, I think, enforce the importance of these PII findings, track and monitor progress, and come to some kind of consolidation of where we're going with these PII findings. Have you guys responded to our auditors with all of these, my 57 lines here of PII findings?
I was not aware of the request, and so I'm not sure who, with whom you're working, but if
these were the findings from the audit reports from the past several years.
The list. Go ahead, Mark.
I can say as one of the institutions, internal audit from the USM has been following up with all of our institutions on all of those findings. I don't know how they're reporting back to you, but there has been a concerted effort in the last 1.5 to 2 years to go back through all of those and close them all up.
Okay, that's really good news. Colleagues, Secretary, CISO, questions for the USM? Okay, just one final question. We certainly don't want to put any unfunded mandates. Oh, Senator
Sorry,
Kitchen.
I'm so sorry, Senator Hester. Mr. Cather or Mr. Eismeyer, or you can respond offline. Delegate Brooke Learman and I passed a bill, as you know, related to PII and privacy and security for USM. We did a delayed effective date for your comfort and prudent planning purposes. If there's a super quick response, how's it going? Any surprises, any challenges with rollout, or you can respond offline if you want?
I can go ahead and respond. I mean, we are making progress. We're right now identifying privacy staff members at every institution that can take the lead on getting that implemented. And we've started discussions within the USM on exactly how we're going to define that and how we're going to be compliant. And that's one of the things we even highlighted in our response to this request. Was part of that bill included our cybersecurity framework and requirements. And so we're still in the process of going through and implementing that, and we are making progress.
So if I can just ask, Madam Chair, Mr. Cather, if there are any issues, if there are speed bumps that you guys hit along the way that Mr. Hook and his team and we legislators could benefit from knowing about, I hope you will share them with us.
Absolutely. The only speed bump we've hit is COVID and trying to make sure you've got all the resources.
There's that. Who knew that was a speed bump?
That's been a minor little hiccup since we passed that bill, but yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Cather. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure.
So just to close this out, I was trying to say we didn't want to put any unfunded mandate in terms of you doubly complying with the standards you've set for yourself, plus the standards that DO-IT has articulated. Is there an easy way, maybe some kind of annual assessment that an external party does, or some kind of certification? Like, for example, we had a back and forth with the Maryland Stadium Authority, and like NFL has a cybersecurity standard and audit, and they have to report every year to NFL on their stuff. Is there something equivalent that you could send to us or send to DO-IT on an annual basis that would make us confident that you really are following at least the minimum standards of the state? Because it sounds like you're going above and beyond.
So would that take I mean, we can certainly send our standards as they stand. I mean, I guess I'd be curious, what would sort of answer that? Is that our standards as well as a summary line by line of how those mesh? Or
perhaps, Mr. Stewart, if you're willing to articulate what's included in the process, whatever we're doing for the state agencies right now that we're, some percentage of the way through.
So the security assessments use the IT security manual as the control depth for an assessment using the NIST cybersecurity framework thank you, Senator Kagan, to say how is each agency doing in the control areas that are most valuable towards protecting state agencies. I'm more than happy.
Is there any reason that could not be, that the University System of Maryland couldn't do that as well?
None that I can think of, but I would defer to them specifically, because I think they know their business better than I do. So I would expect that they might be able to tell me why certain things might not make sense or why it makes sense. And we have a great relationship with this team. So
Senator Kagan, then we'll give the final word to our colleagues from USM.
Thank you, Senator Hester. And my kitty wants to be on camera, I think, more than I want him to be on camera. Chip, two things. First off, whenever anyone says NIST, I have to brag that NIST is in the heart of my district, and the National Institutes of Standards and Technology does extraordinarily important work. It's the most important, least visible federal government agency, in my opinion. But the reason that I also, separate from bragging, what we heard from the Maryland Association of Counties was kind of don't do one size fits all and all that, or we heard that initially. Is there anything from NIST, when you said their sort of best practices and recommendations and policies, is there anything that kind of doesn't work for Maryland, that their one size fits all for all 50 states doesn't work well for us?
So, I think there's obviously pockets where NIST doesn't line up perfectly, but I think you can take the framework, you can take the building blocks and make it work for almost any organization. And that's what we've tried to do, is to say, if it doesn't work perfectly for us, how do we make it work in such a way that as we bring in new people, we're not teaching them a completely new way to do things. And it allows us to use things like the NICE framework for developing job classifications and specifications.
NICE framework, I assume, is not an adjective, but an acronym?
It is indeed an acronym. So
I don't know it.
So NICE is part of, it's NIST Special Publication 800-181, I believe. And that is what it does is it creates a series of knowledge, skills, and abilities related to common cybersecurity jobs, so that you can build, if you want to do this job, here are the things you need to know, here are the things you would need to be able to do.
So, Madam Chair, it seems to me that if Mr. Stewart was just talking about, yes, we follow NIST guidelines, but sometimes we work around the edges or we have some flexibility that's needed. It seems to me that that level of compliance and partnership would make sense for us with our agencies, our counties, and our municipalities.
And our universities?
And our universities.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that they're probably already using that standard. I'm just asking for some kind of, annual checkup, proof of, like you go to the doctor for an annual checkup. I'm just asking if they can give us some kind of proof on an annual basis that it's up to snuff, similar to the assessments that Mr. Stewart recommended.
Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, I think that there are certainly ways that we just need to work together to figure out exactly how detailed and what form that kind of a report would take. I mean, we already get audited every 3 years by OLA. We get audited by internal audit and by external auditors as well. If this needs to be a fourth kind of audit, then we just need to figure out how that needs to be and what you're looking for that. We certainly do already use the NIST frameworks as the underlying component. The same as like we have to be functionally compatible with the state. The state is functionally compatible with NIST, and so are we. And so it's all kind of like one framework and family that we work from. But we need to figure out like what level of detail and all of that, plus how it fits with the other audits that we're already doing and that we already go through. And we're always happy to provide the information and make sure the information's safe.
Thank you very much.
We just want to use a nice framework, Madam Chair, because I want to be nice.
No pun intended. Well, with that, I think that ends this committee's work session. For members, we'll be meeting again, I believe Thursday after our hearings, to propose amendments to the 5 bills in front of us based on what we've heard today. And if you're thinking about proposing amendments, I just encourage you to reach out to Ms. Foxworth as quickly as possible. And I want to thank everybody for your time today. You're answering some difficult questions under a very short time span. I know that everybody here has the best interest of the state cybersecurity at heart. So thank you for all you do. And with that, we're adjourned.
Thank you. We appreciate the time.
Thanks, everybody.